What are things that have changed in American or British culture that you feel over the past 200 years before that were unchanging?
Okay. One of the things that has changed in Britain over the last 30 years is we now have extensive number of Islamist terrorist attacks, mass stabbings, mass rape of British girls by Islamist and Muslim grooming gangs. This is not something that happened in this culture before.
Okay, so sexual assault and rape did happen before in
Did you hear the words
right?
I said, or did you?
So you said grooming gangs. I know there's the example from the 80s and 90s of the Rotherham.
They're not from the 80s and 90s.
When someone says they're going to debate Konstantin Kisin from trigonometry, I'm just like, are you stupid? Are you dumb? Are you insane? Do you think there's any universe in which you're going to win against one of the most intelligent and capable media personalities in the world? Oh, yeah, you do think so? Great. You are the perfect person to debate because you will absolutely lose. And that's exactly what happened. Konstantin Kisin debated Destiny, of all people, who really, really loves to debate everything from the left-wing perspective about immigration. And surprise, surprise, it didn't go so well for him, if you get my gist. Anyways, let's listen to some of the arguments, the very intelligent and coherent arguments made by Konstantin, basically saying that maybe immigration is not a great thing for your culture. You know, maybe those two things don't align perfectly. Alas, who would have thought we'd reach the days where we actually have to have conversations about this? But you know what? Let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. Let's discuss and let's see what Konstantin has to say. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Welcome to the Pushback. I'm Meira K, your host. We have some great content for you today. Let's dive in.
Can national identity survive open immigration?
I guess I'll kind of take the reins on this. I feel like when I hear people talk about things related to open borders, mass migration, or national identity, there's kind of two questions that always pop up in my mind, and I never hear people actually kind of tack down what they mean when they say these things. So the first thing is, for national identity, I don't know as much about the various identities that exist in the UK, but I know for the United States, to try to find an overlap between identity from a gay guy in San Francisco versus like a farmer in Iowa or something, there's not many commonalities there to speak of when you talk about national identity, especially when I'm thinking of it in the context of what type of immigrant would threaten that whatever unified identity, whatever those two things are. So I'm kind of curious, I guess, when I think about national identity, when I think about it being threatened by people, my first question is, what is the national identity that we're trying to protect for the United States or for the United Kingdom? And then when we talk about like migration or mass migration, what...
One second. I just want to be clear that Destiny, and this is obviously not a surprise because this is exactly the perspective on the left, his argument against, or his kind of questioning in the whole question of if an identity would be destroyed by just open-ended immigration is, do we even have an identity? Is there really something to be proud of as an American? Like, we're so different. Is there anything that even unites us? So how could somebody new coming in make any difference? That's what's so sad about these lefties, is they actually think they don't have a national identity worth protecting. Let's see his second part to this argument.
What do we mean exactly when we say that?
What do we mean?
Well, okay. So there's two questions there. What is national identity and what is immigration? Why don't we start in reverse and talk about immigration? Take Britain as an example, right? So I've lived in this country. I came to Britain it was just about Russia. Prior to that, it was the Soviet Union in 1996. So let's go back to 1991, because that's the data when we have the census. 1991. What has happened in the last 35 years? So in the last 35 years ago, this country had a population of 58 million people. Today, the population is 70 million. Almost all of that is due to mass immigration. So the population of Britain, the immigrant population of Britain, that's first generation, people who've arrived, went from 4 million to 12 million in the space of 35 years, right? It trebled in 35 years. Now, you might say, well, you know, is that a lot? Is that a little? Who knows? That is more people, in the last 35 years, more people came to Britain than came to Britain in the previous 2 millennia. So more people in 35 years than had come in 2,000 years. Now, that seems like quite a lot, right? Now,
more people in 35 years than in 2,000 years? No, that's not a lot of people. It's just a normal small number, a few million. Who really cares?
We'll talk about some more facts about this, and then we can talk about national identity. I'm going to take a little time, if you don't mind, just to lay this out.
Yeah, I guess just to kind of poke around as you answer.
Yeah, but hold on. Let me just let's talk about what we mean by immigration, right?
Okay. Well, and then also the mass, because I hear a lot of these words will be like, it was a lot of people.
Well, hold on.
I was like, what does that mean? Yeah.
I'm explaining it. So
Okay.
more people in 35 years than 2,000 years, that sounds like quite a lot of people. Is
Not
that fair?
necessarily, no.
Is that fair?
No, not really, right? In the
Not
context,
really.
like if I were to ask for like the total growth of wealth compared to like the last like 50 years might also dwarf the last 2,000 years, or the total amount of carbon pollution, or the total amount of TV episodes or plays written or songs written. Like I don't know if I would just arbitrarily say, I'm going to look at immigration and I'm going to measure it past some 1,000-year thing or whatever.
You don't think that more people coming into a country in 35 years than had come in the previous 2,000 years is quite a lot?
Also considering the fact, remember what happened in World War I, World War II, how many people were displaced, how many people had to leave, how many people tried to get to England, tried to get to the United States. It's not like we didn't have immigration, right? There's an intelligence to what Destiny is saying a little bit, which is basically like, yeah, well, last 2,000 years, if people couldn't travel anywhere, then it's not such a big deal. But in the last 100 years, people have been traveling and migrating a lot. Ships, planes, a lot. So the last 35 years is only since 1990, right? So the 1980s, 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s, 30s. Then when people were, there's a big difference.
I just think that statement is like vacuous and meaningless. When we say quite a lot, what like should it have been less? Like, what kind of immigrants shouldn't have come? No. What does that mean?
You're making it into a moral conversation. I'm talking about purely numbers. You might think it's a great thing, right? Like,
well, to be clear, I'm not talking. Just to be clear, I'm not talking moral.
Keep interrupting.
You said a lot, yeah.
You keep interrupting. So,
okay.
If we're talking about quite a lot, you keep trying to make it a moral thing.
I'm not making it a moral thing.
If we're going to have a conversation, you're going to have to let me finish a sentence at least.
Well, just don't misquote my position.
Okay, so just calm down for a bit.
I'm super calm.
I know you've got your Red Bull. Just have some
my
water.
Red Bull.
Chill
I'm
out.
still super calm.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a very
It's getting so awkward between the two of them. This is a classic, by the way. When you're losing an argument, you start to like, but this is stupid. And that's vacuous. That's ridiculous. Stay with the facts, guys. If you want to win an argument, just stay with the facts.
Question, yeah.
If more people, if you're making a moral issue, it becomes very clouded and complicated. Let's just talk about what we're talking about in terms of pure numbers, right? If more people have come into a country in 35 years than have come in 2,000 years, that is objectively a lot. Now, you might think it's a good thing. Like, I like ice cream, and if I eat a tub of ice cream, I'm not going to say that's not a lot of ice cream. I still like it, but it's a lot of ice cream, right? We would accept that. It's more, a scoop is not a lot of ice cream, a tub is a lot of ice cream. So more people coming into a country in 35 years than had come in 2,000 years is objectively a lot of people, okay?
Just to be clear, when you say a lot, that's a normative value that's with respect to some kind of norm or when you say a lot.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Compared to before.
Yeah,
compared
that's
to the entire span of the
that is
history of this
objectively
country.
true. It's just kind of a meaningless statement. Like
So
everything is a lot
you've
more
accepted
than the
that
past
what I'm saying is
2 millennia.
objectively true. I'm grateful.
Correct, yes. That's a meaningless statement, but yes.
Now that we've got there, what does it mean? Well, first of all, think about it like this. And again, it's not about whether you like it or not, whether you think it's a good thing or not, or a bad thing. The three biggest cities in this country in the last 30 years have ceased to be majority inhabited by the people who are native to this land. That's just a fact. And I am one of the people who's come here in that time. So I'm not saying it's only a terrible thing, but it's an objective fact. The three biggest cities in the country are now majority minority. London, and this has happened very quickly. London was 80% white British in 1991. It is probably around 30% white British today. So if you have seen that level of change in the city in which you live, think about this as well. 3/4 of the people who live in this country today are over the age of 35. So all of this has happened within the lifetime of one generation, effectively. That is a level of change that is A, completely unprecedented, B, extremely transformative, whether you like it or not, good or bad, whatever you may think. You might think, oh, you know, the amount of different kinds of food has got better. It's true, objectively. But it's also true, objectively, that entire swathes of this city are no longer inhabited by the people who used to live here. Again, this is an objective fact. You can like it, you can dislike it, but that is something that has happened. This is true of London, it's true of Manchester, it's true of Birmingham, and it's true of several other smaller cities in this country. By 2060, according to current projections, white British people will become a minority in this country. 2060 is the next 35 years, right? And that's the entire kind of demographic transformation. These are facts. Forget about people's opinions, my opinion, your opinion. In terms of illegal immigration, there are now almost 1 million, we don't know exactly because it's hard to measure, but we have almost 1 million illegal immigrants in Britain today, which for a population of 70 million is quite a lot. And we currently spend £14 million a day I'm not talking about the cost to the taxpayer of having 1 million illegal immigrants here. I'm talking about how much we spend to accommodate them and all other things. Now, 14 million, is that a lot per day? It's quite a lot. But also this is happening at an unprecedented rate. More people come to Britain illegally today than came legally when I came here in 1996. I'll say that again. More people come here illegally every year than came here in 1996 when I...
Remember, the question here that he was asked by Destiny was, well, what even is like mass immigration, right? And so he's breaking it down and he's basically saying, well, this is how society would be destroyed. Because if you're going to go from 80% to a 30% of a population, that's going to be a lot. And if you have millions of people coming in illegally, that's going to be a problem. Why are they coming in illegally if they could come in legally? Probably because they're not the type of people that you would accept in legally. And that's something to think about. That's going to shift the way a culture and a community exists.
Came here. That's the level of change when it comes to illegal immigration. And the cost of it, £14 million a day, is increased by a factor of 10 in the last 10 years alone. So it's 1,000% more than what it was. Those are the facts about immigration. So when we talk about immigration and whether it's compatible with national identity, it depends what we mean. If we're talking about, 20, 30, 40,000 people a year, highly selective from compatible cultures as it used to be, perfectly compatible, and in fact, I think probably quite desirable.
Correct.
If we're talking about what we've seen over the last 30 years, I don't think it's compatible with any sort of national identity at all. Now, I've been talking for a long time, so we can get to national identity after you've addressed that.
Sure. So I guess the thing that is a little bit strange to me about the immigration question is that sometimes I'll hear a bunch of descriptions laid out, and I don't know exactly what I'm supposed to do with them. There's oftentimes a lack of a prescriptive statement. It seems like there's a little bit of fear of committing to any particular idea about what an ideal immigrant would look like. And then it feels like we're sometimes also lumping a ton of immigrants together. So for instance, when we say there have been so many more immigrants that have come here in the past 30, 35 years, but then we also mention like illegal immigrants or asylum seekers, these are all different groups of people. So I don't know why. I
separated them out. I talked about legal immigration and illegal immigration, right?
I understand, but so the prompt has to do with basically can a country's culture, whatever, survive mass migration? Illegal immigrants are not mass migrating here. The mass migration...
They are.
So,
just by the way, watch the difference. The difference between the person who knows he has the upper hand in the argument here and the person who doesn't. One is clear, consistent, providing the information, not really emotive. The other one's jittery and constantly like, what are you even saying? It doesn't even make sense. I don't even understand what you say. And it's this like such a different energy. And he's like, what do you've looped things together. And he's like, no, I made things pretty clear. There's such a different energy between people who know that they are right versus people who are trying to prove to the world that they are not wrong. Did you hear what I just said? There's a difference between people who know they are right. They have the evidence. They look calm. They look capable. They look and sound clear. And people who are desperate to make sure that nobody thinks that they're saying something wrong. Right? They're overthinking the way that this is being presented. So they're trying to come out sounding intelligent. They throw out big words. They throw out quick statements. They speak very, 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 very quickly in a way to kind of make it seem like they know so much that they can overcome the simple, pure facts on the table.
Just told you, more illegal immigrants come here every year now than legal immigrants came here 30 years ago.
I understand that, but if you
so
look
they
at
are mass migrating.
So then are the legal ones mass migrating, or what? Is it just...
The legal immigrants are also mass migrating. It's possible for them both to be mass migrating.
But it's like 10 to 1, right? So
yes.
So comparing the two, it seems like we're talking about different kinds of... We're probably talking about different kinds of immigrants. When we talk about legal versus illegal...
We're talking about both, yeah.
Well, no.
I'm talking about both.
You don't see any difference between a legal immigrant versus an illegal immigrant?
Well, of course I do.
Okay.
But they are both mass migrating here. They're both coming here in unprecedented numbers.
everything definitionally is unprecedented as you move forward in years. We have an unprecedented amount of technology, an unprecedented amount of energy generation, an unprecedented amount of
I think you might be confused about the meaning of the word unprecedented.
Unprecedented as in it hasn't happened at that level before. Yeah.
Right. So if we have immigration of 20,000 people a year, that wouldn't be unprecedented because we had that before.
Yeah, but the population is growing of the country, the population of the rest of the planet is growing, the economy is growing, there's a whole bunch of other factors at play. It's not like all else equal, there's just 10 million people that have shown up. Like there's other factors at play at all points in time as well. So
Yes,
it's a bit reductive to say like, well, we have an unprecedented wave of whatever. There's unprecedented things happening definitionally every year forward into the future we go.
No, that's
yes.
not true.
What's the thing that's been frozen in time?
I just explained it to you.
Yes, you laid out a bunch of numbers, and I just explained why they're contextless and meaningless. But now I'm asking, what is the thing that's unprecedented?
Look,
or I'm sorry, what would be a thing that is not changing in the past 30 years? Like if you had to look at something.
One of the most amazing things of arguing with anybody from your position is the extent to which they refuse to understand what words mean. I just explained to you repeatedly what unprecedented means. It means that it hasn't happened before. There have been times in the history of this country when its immigration was in the tens of thousands, and for us to go back to that would not be going forward to something unprecedented. It would be returning to something that we used to do.
Sure.
Right?
And my question
is, what has happened in the last 30
I understand
years
what's happened. You've explained it
is
several
unprecedented.
Times. Is there anything in U.S. culture, in British culture, that has remained the same for the past 30, 40, 50, 60 years, for the past 100 years, that doesn't have an unprecedented thing happening constantly?
Absolutely. I mean, that is what a culture is. It is what is preserved over time.
How?
A culture is what people do without having been told to do so by a law.
But what is an example of a culture that is unchanging?
How much have you traveled around the world?
Probably more than you?
Probably not, actually.
Okay. So then you should be able to very easily answer. Here's an example of a culture that exists.
Every time I try and answer your question, you keep talking over me.
Well, it's because when you answer, you ramble and say irrelevant things. So my question is,
how can I ramble in half a sentence?
You've been saying plenty of sentences. Do you think the speaking time up to this point is even, or do you think you've spoken more than me?
I have spoken more than you, but I haven't interrupted you.
So then you had an opportunity to speak. You're just not answering my question. So my question is very simple. What's a culture that you feel has been unchanged for the past 50 years? Or what is an example of cultural preservation? I feel like cultures are evolving all the time. It's definitionally a part of culture.
Of course. Cultures are evolving all the time. But if you were to be plonked in 1970s Afghanistan and 1990s Afghanistan and 2010s Afghanistan and 1950s Britain, 1970s Britain and 2010s Britain, there would be common themes that run through both of those places so that you would instantly recognize, I am in Afghanistan, I am in Britain. Would you accept that?
I agree that different cultures are different, yes.
Right, well done. Good. So we've got there then.
Well, you just established that there are. This is like saying
different cultures are different, which means that they have something about them.
Yes, and
that makes them different.
I guess I'm just trying to figure out for British or American culture, what are these things that you feel are common? Maybe you go back 30, 40, 50 years that were common across the whole country that you feel are changing in a way that they never changed in the past.
Okay, done.
Are you going to answer that question? He's not going to answer the question. Go ahead.
I've attempted to answer your question many times, and I'll do so again. However, first of all, am I going to be okay to speak now for a bit? Is that going to happen?
Sure. Can you repeat my question first so I know what you're...
Your question is about what is culture. You brought up crime.
That wasn't my question. My question is, over the past 30 or 40 years, what are things that have changed in American or British culture that you feel over the past 200 years before that were unchanging?
Okay. One of the things that has changed in Britain over the last 30 years is we now have an extensive number of Islamist terrorist attacks, mass stabbings, mass rape of British girls by Islamist and Muslim grooming gangs. This is not something that happened in this culture before.
Okay, so... Sexual assault and rape did happen before in
Did you hear the words I said, or did you?
So you said grooming gangs. I know there's the example from the 80s and 90s with the Rotherham.
They're not from the 80s and 90s. They're happening right now.
What is another grooming gang example? Because I know there are rapes and stuff that happen, but I don't think there are.
Yeah, well, let me explain it to you. So grooming gangs. This is a euphemism that we use to pretend that they're not what they are mass rape gangs where young British girls, usually underage, but also often sometimes young women, would be plied with drugs, plied with alcohol, would be taken from the care homes where they were, predominantly by Pakistani, sometimes other Indian subcontinent Muslims. They would be targeted primarily because they were white and British, so these were racially aggravated hate crimes. and they would be mass raped over periods of years sometimes. That did not used to happen in Britain.
So
that is a cultural
change.
Used
to happen.
Can I finish what I'm saying, please?
Okay, you're not going to answer my question. Okay.
I am answering a question.
Well, my question was, what are examples? I don't think this has happened outside of the Rotherham grooming gang, that whole scandal. There have been rapes, there have been gang rapes, but the idea of like a coordinated grooming gang type mass Pakistani targeting British girls rapes, that type of thing is not a thing that I'm aware has been seen in Britain outside of the large Rotherham scandal.
Well, I don't know. I think the fact that somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million British girls might have been raped by these gangs is quite a big deal, and it represents a change in the culture of this country. The problem for you is I voted Remain in the referendum.
Because you hadn't been bullied by the Cambridge students yet. I'm aware of the history, but I know.
So, you've come here with a bunch of talking points. That's great.
Hold on. We can break down
Stephen,
anything you want.
Stop interrupting.
Don't accuse me of having talking points.
Stop
Deal with my
interrupting.
arguments.
Stop interrupting.
Then address what I said.
Stop interrupting.
Address what I've said.
Stop interrupting.
Address what I've said.
Stop interrupting.
I believe in you.
Stop interrupting. I let you talk, and I let you make your points. Have some respect for me and for my opportunity to express myself as well. That is how a debate is conducted. So stop interrupting. We started this with a conversation about mass immigration, and I gave you the facts on it, and I defined what immigration is, right? Mass immigration. Now, you're talking about culture. I also explained to you what culture is, and I explained it to you by explaining that it's a continuity of certain things, which may also evolve over time. Now, in terms of your point about mass immigration since Brexit, I was not a supporter of Brexit. I didn't think it was necessarily a good idea. And I agree with you that it hasn't reduced immigration. But I don't see how that's relevant to this conversation. We have had mass immigration happen in this country continually over a long period of time, which has changed the country in the way that I gave you. And I gave you a number of examples, like Islamist terrorism, like grooming gangs and other things, which I don't think you're able to address because they counteract the argument that you keep making, which is, well, nothing changes when you bring in 8 million people over 30 years.
Did I say that?
Can I finish, please?
Did I say that?
Can
Why do you
I
have
finish?
to invent
Can I finish,
points?
please?
You just can't address anything.
Can I finish, please? If I interrupted you, if I interrupted you every time you misrepresent my argument, you'd never talk at all.
Go for it. Okay.
So can I finish, please? You made the point that basically what I'm trying to say is, not trying to say, what I'm saying is when you bring in large numbers of people into a country from a different culture, that will necessarily change the culture. The other thing that I explained to you is there's been such a large wave of immigration into this country now that has fundamentally changed the sense of British people about the place in which they live. It is affecting the demographic dynamics of major cities in this country and the way people feel about that. But all of those things, the facts that I gave you about immigration, they are what they are. You can think that they're good. You can think that they're bad. That is a separate conversation. The facts are what they are, right? There's also a thing about how British people feel about it. When I came to this country in 1996, 3% of the British public thought that immigration was a major concern. Today, about 65 to 70% of British people say that there are too many immigrants in this country and too many immigrants coming here. Now, I think British people probably have a better idea of how they feel about immigration than you, Stephen, and that is how they feel.
Why do you think over half the British population believes that the majority of the immigrants here today are here illegally, if they've got such a great handle on it or a great idea about what immigration is doing to the country?
The reason that people overestimate immigration is people generally, when asked about things, overestimate pretty much everything or underestimate things terribly because people are not very good with numbers. But the other reason, of course, people aren't able to quote you the exact number of people who
I didn't ask for a quote of the exact number.
You said this earlier, and I'm addressing your broader point, which is why do people misunderstand the immigration statistics? Is that people don't look at immigration as this is the number of people who came this year and this is the number of people who came last year. They look at the reality of their lives, they look at the change they see around them, and what they're really concerned about is the cumulative impact of immigration over the period of their lifetime, which, as I explained to you, has been huge, unprecedented over the last 35 years, and will be even more unprecedented in terms of its cumulative impact over the next 35 years. Now, it's true that immigration has come down to 300 or something thousand in the last year. Doesn't mean it will stay that way, but also I never predicted it would get to 1 million. I think Matt did. But the point I would make is the transformation over a 30-year period is what people actually care about and which is what they're right to care about. Now, as for the point about illegal immigration, yeah, it's true. Illegal immigration is a smaller percentage of the total immigration that we have than legal immigration, but it's still higher today than it was 35 years ago and 30 years ago, which is way too high. Illegal immigration should be zero.
So you tell me who won that debate. And you guys should go watch the entire debate because it's wonderful. You just tell me, was one person obviously better than the other? I don't know. But here's the thing about these people. They refuse to deal with the evidence. Look, let me ask you a very simple question, because this was the question they debated. Is a national identity transformed by open-ended immigration, right? Does an identity change? If somebody came to you and they said, let's change it this way. If you saw a friend of yours, okay, and they told you, and you didn't recognize them, and you found out that they had plastic surgery to change 70% of their face. Now their face is only 30% what it used to be. Would you say that face has changed? Now, if you came into a house, and that house had been renovated, but only 70% of it had been renovated, 30% of it stayed the same, would you think that that house had changed? Question. Simple question. Now, if you're going to speak about cultural identity, if you're going to, who are the people who define a culture? The people of the culture, right? What is a culture? What is the definition? The customs, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation, people, or other social group. Okay? It really is the arts and manifestations of human intellectual achievements regarded collectively, meaning it's everything about a society that exists outside of the laws. It's the foods, it's the music, it's the traditions. It's really what makes something uniquely it, right? If you're going to take 70% of the people who hold on to that culture and remove them, and they're now only 30%, by definition, that is going to drastically change a culture. It is such a simple argument to be made. But this is what this guy does. He can't handle the fact that Constantine just has very simple evidence. He just can't handle it. So he's trying to be like, yeah, what are you even saying? How do you even know? Do you even know that 35% of the is even understand? Do you think that's been changed? What are you talking? You're bullying me. You're not letting me speak. And he's doing all of those things that people do when they're losing an argument. And Constantine's basically sitting there being like, yeah, sorry. I think this is actually quite simple. If you're going to ask that, you need to know what immigration is. You have to understand that a lot of people coming in and taking over is going to change. Take the color blue. If you have a color blue and you pour 70% of red into that blue, then it is going to change from blue into purple. There is a reality to something that if you take something at a certain rate of saturation and then you reduce it to 30%, it's going to change. A culture will change if you bring in 70% of people that have a different culture. Duh, simple, easy. Anyways, that's my thoughts on the topic. What do you think? Does a culture change from mass immigration? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for your attention to this matter.